The world had died a long time ago. What was left behind was neither living nor dead, just ruins caught in the wind. Asher walked alone through the crumbling highways, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his knife strapped to his chest. He had stopped counting how many days had passed since he lost his group. A horde had torn through their camp 3 nights ago. He had fought. He had run. And in the end, he had survived. That was all he knew how to do. The wasteland stretched endlessly before him, gray, barren, and silent. The silence was worse than the screams. He checked his canteen. Empty. His stomach twisted, but hunger had become a constant companion. He needed food. Water. Shelter. Then, a voice crackled to life. The radio clipped to his belt was dead, had been for weeks, but now it buzzed with static. Then came the voice, distant, but clear enough to send a chill through him. If you can hear this, there is still a place left, a safe haven, follow the eastern roads, do not trust. The message cut off. Asher stood still, listening to the emptiness left behind. A safe haven. It could be a lie. A trap. Or it could be the only chance he had left. His grip tightened on the rifle. He turned east. The city loomed in the distance, its skeletal remains stretching against the sky. Asher moved carefully, his eyes scanning every broken window, every rusted-out vehicle. He knew better than to trust an empty street. The dead were never far. A sound echoed, a metal can rolling. Asher spun, rifle raised. Nothing. He moved forward, silent and steady. His instincts screamed at him, something wasn't right. Then he saw them. Not zombies. Worse. 4 men, dressed in scavenged armor, crouched behind a burned-out truck. One of them had a rifle, the others carried machetes. Their eyes were hungry, desperate. Phantoms. Not real ghosts, but close enough. They haunted the wasteland, hunting survivors like him, stripping them of supplies, weapons, sometimes even their skin. The one with the rifle grinned. You look lost, friend. Asher didn't answer. He did the math. 4 of them. 1 of him. The rifleman was the biggest problem. The man with the machete took a step forward. Drop the gun. We'll make it quick. Yeah, another chuckled. We ain't monsters. They were. Asher moved fast. He kicked a loose brick, sending it skidding across the asphalt. The rifleman flinched, just a second, but that was all Asher needed. He dove, rolled, and fired. The first shot hit the rifleman in the chest. The second tore through another's knee, dropping him with a scream. Asher hit the ground hard, spun, and swung his rifle like a club. He caught the third man across the jaw, sending him sprawling. The last one lunged. Asher barely dodged the machete as it slashed past his arm. He felt the burn of torn fabric. He countered. Drove his knife up into the man's ribs. The phantom gasped, eyes wide. Asher twisted the blade. Silence. Asher pulled his knife free, wiping the blood against his pants. The bodies were still. The fight was over. But something was wrong. The street had gone too quiet. Then he heard it. The distant moan of the undead. The gunfire had drawn them. Asher turned. Over the horizon, figures shambled into view. Dozens. Maybe more. He had 2 choices, stay and fight, or run. He ran. Asher sprinted through the ruined streets, his boots slamming against cracked pavement. The dead were behind him, slow but relentless, their guttural moans growing louder. The city was a maze of collapsed buildings and rusted-out vehicles. Every turn could lead to salvation or a dead end. Asher didn't have time to gamble. He vaulted over a rusted sedan and slid behind a crumbling brick wall, forcing himself to control his breathing. The phantoms were gone, but the real danger was closing in. The undead were moving fast, faster than he remembered. Mutations. Some of them changed over time. The longer they rotted, the more unnatural they became. Twisted. Faster. Hungrier. He checked his ammo. 5 rounds left. Not enough. A low snarl echoed from the alleyway ahead. Asher's heart pounded. He wasn't alone. A figure stepped into view. Not a zombie. A woman. She was ragged, her face streaked with dirt, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. She held a pistol, shaking slightly, but still pointed at his chest. "Drop it," she ordered. Asher didn't move. "You don't want to do this." The woman's grip tightened. "You don't get a say." The dead moaned in the distance. The sound sent a chill through the alley. "Look," Asher said, voice steady. "We can waste time aiming at each other, or we can get the hell out of here before they rip us apart." The woman hesitated. Her gaze flickered past him, at the approaching horde. Then, without a word, she lowered the pistol. "This way." She turned and sprinted into the alley. Asher hesitated for half a second before following. They moved fast, weaving through the ruins. The woman knew the terrain, leading him through a collapsed overpass, into an abandoned subway station. She stopped at a rusted maintenance door and yanked it open. In. Asher ducked inside just as she slammed the door shut. Darkness swallowed them. His breath was ragged, his muscles tense. The only sound was the distant groans of the dead, muffled by concrete. "Who the hell are you?" Asher finally asked. The woman leaned against the wall, catching her breath. "Elise." Her pistol was still in her hand, but she didn't raise it again. "You saved my ass back there," Asher admitted. "Why?" Elise smirked, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Didn't do it for you." She stepped deeper into the tunnel, motioning for him to follow. Asher didn't trust her. But for now, he didn't have a choice. The underground passage stretched endlessly into the dark. Their flashlights flickered over walls covered in grime and old bloodstains. Asher kept his rifle ready. "You know these tunnels?" Elise nodded. "I've been through them before. They're safer than the streets." "Safer," he repeated. "Not safe." She gave him a grim look. "Nothing's safe." They moved in silence for a while, the weight of the wasteland pressing down on them. Finally, Asher spoke. "The phantoms. You know them?" Elisa's face darkened. "Yeah." She didn't elaborate. Asher studied her. "You used to run with them, didn't you?" Elisa's jaw tightened. "A long time ago." That explained a lot. She glanced at him. "And you? What's your story?" "Survivor," he said simply. She gave a short, bitter laugh. "Aren't we all?" Asher hesitated. Then, finally, I heard a transmission. Elisa's expression sharpened. "From where?" "Didn't say." He met her gaze. "It talked about a safe haven." Elise exhaled slowly. "It's real." Asher's pulse quickened. "You've been there?" "No," she admitted. "But I know it exists." "Where?" Elise hesitated. "Across the gray zone." Asher frowned. He had heard rumors about the place. A city swallowed by the dead. No one who entered ever came back. "You expect me to believe that?" he asked. "I don't expect you to believe anything," Elise said. "But if you want to survive, you need to start moving in the right direction." Asher considered her words. Then, from the darkness, a sound echoed. "Not zombies. Voices." Elisa's face went pale. They found us. The phantoms. Asher clenched his jaw. No rest. No safety. The wasteland never let go. Elise turned, urgency in her voice. Come on. If they catch us down here, we're dead. Asher didn't need convincing. They ran. Footsteps echoed through the tunnel. The phantoms were close. Too close. Asher and Elise ran through the underground passage, their breath ragged, boots slamming against the damp floor. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and something worse, something rotting. Ahead, the tunnel split in two. Elise barely hesitated. Left. Asher followed, trusting her instinct over his own. The phantoms were hunters, they knew these tunnels well. But Elise had once been one of them. If anyone could outmaneuver them, it was her. A gunshot rang out, sparking off the tunnel wall. Asher flinched. More shots followed, bullets slamming into concrete, sending shards flying. We're out of time, Elise hissed. Up ahead, the tunnel opened into a collapsed maintenance shaft. A rusted metal ladder stretched upward, vanishing into darkness. Elise didn't slow. She grabbed the rungs and climbed. Asher turned, raising his rifle. Shadows flickered at the far end of the tunnel, dark figures moving fast. No time. He grabbed the ladder and climbed. The phantoms weren't far. He could hear them now, cursing, laughing. They won't get far, one of them sneered. Another chuckled. Elise should have stayed dead. Asher's blood ran cold. They reached the top. Elise shoved open a rusted hatch, and they scrambled into an old train yard, hidden beneath the wreckage of a collapsed overpass. Asher slammed the hatch shut behind them. Elise grabbed a steel beam and jammed it through the handles. It wouldn't hold forever, but it would buy them time. Come on, she said, already moving. Asher followed, his mind still on what the phantoms had said. She should have stayed dead. The train yard was a graveyard of twisted metal and abandoned railcars, rusted hulks looming in the gloom. Elise led the way, weaving through the wreckage. She moved like she had been here before. Asher kept his rifle ready. They knew you. Elise didn't answer. They thought you were dead, he pressed. She let out a slow breath. I should be. The silence between them stretched. Finally, Elise stopped beside an overturned cargo container, crouching low. They called themselves the Phantoms because they didn't just kill people, she said, voice barely above a whisper. They erased them. They took everything, your food, your weapons, your life. And when they were done, they made sure no one even remembered your name. Asher tightened his grip on the rifle. Elise glanced at him. I used to be one of them. He had suspected as much, but hearing her say it was different. I left, she continued. Tried to disappear. But you don't leave the Phantoms. Not really. Asher considered that. Why? Elisa's gaze hardened. Because I saw what they were planning. A distant howl echoed through the night. Something inhuman. Asher tensed. The hell was that? Elise exhaled slowly. It's why we need to keep moving. She reached for something hidden beneath the cargo container, a duffel bag. She unzipped it, revealing supplies, ammo, medical kits, rations. You've had a stash here the whole time? Asher asked. I planned ahead, she said. The Phantoms aren't the only danger out here. She tossed him a bottle of water. Drink. You look like hell. Asher caught it, hesitating before taking a sip. The water was stale but better than nothing. Elise strapped on a combat vest, reloading her pistol. We need to reach the outskirts by sunrise. If we stay too long, we won't make it out alive. Asher nodded, but his mind was already racing. What had she seen? And what the hell was waiting for them in the gray zone? They moved fast, slipping through the wreckage and into the streets beyond. The city was dead. Not just ruined, but dead. No signs of life. No movement. Then Asher saw it. A phantom patrol. 6 of them, moving methodically, sweeping the area. They carried silenced weapons, their gear better than most scavengers. Elise swore under her breath. They're looking for us. Asher studied their formation. Too many to take head-on. Elise pointed to a gutted pharmacy across the street. We cut through there, take the back alley. They moved carefully, staying low. Asher followed Elise through the shattered doorway, stepping over broken glass. The air inside was thick with the smell of rot. Shelves were overturned, their contents long looted. But something was off. Elise stopped suddenly. Asher saw it too. A body, fresh. Not a phantom. Not a scavenger. A survivor. The wounds were brutal. Torn flesh. Deep claw marks. Not from bullets. Not from knives. Something had ripped them apart. Elise's voice was tight. We have to go. Now. Then they heard it. A low growl. Asher turned, rifle raised. Something moved in the shadows. Then it lunged. The creature lunged from the shadows, moving too fast for something that should have been dead. Asher barely had time to react. His instincts kicked in, and he threw himself backward, just as claws slashed through the air where his throat had been a second ago. Elise fired first. Her pistol barked, the muzzle flash illuminating a nightmare. It was a zombie, or at least it had been. Its body was emaciated, its skin stretched tight over jagged bones. But its eyes, glowed with an unnatural hunger. Its mouth twisted into something almost human, almost aware. It wasn't just a mindless husk. It was hunting them. Asher aimed and fired. The shot punched through its shoulder, but the thing barely flinched. Elise, what the hell is that? He shouted. Something worse than the dead, she snapped. The creature charged again, claws scraping against the tile floor. Elise grabbed a rusted shelf and shoved it over. The metal crashed down, slowing the creature just long enough for them to run. This way. Elise yanked Asher toward the back of the store. They sprinted through a narrow hallway lined with shattered glass and decayed medical supplies. The air reeked of death. Behind them, the creature screeched, a sound so unnatural, so wrong, that it sent a shiver up Asher's spine. They hit the back door hard, slamming into the alley. Asher didn't stop running. Neither did Elise. The city swallowed them in its darkness. They ran until the sounds of the monster faded. Until they couldn't hear the screeching anymore. Only then did they stop, gasping for breath. What the hell was that? Asher demanded. Elise's expression was grim. A phantom experiment. Asher's blood went cold. They're making those things? He asked, voice low. Elise wiped sweat from her forehead. They aren't just raiders, Asher. They aren't just scavengers. The phantoms have been experimenting on the dead, trying to control them. Trying to turn them into weapons. Asher exhaled slowly. And you knew this? I saw enough to know we shouldn't be here. She met his gaze. We have to keep moving. The gray zone is still ahead of us. Asher ran a hand through his hair, forcing himself to focus. Whatever that thing had been, it wasn't the last. And if the phantoms were creating them, the wasteland was about to get a whole lot worse. The night stretched on. They stayed off the main roads, moving through the ruins like ghosts. Asher could feel the city pressing in, watching. Every shattered window, every collapsed building felt like it was hiding something just out of sight. By the time they reached the edge of the city, the sky was beginning to lighten. Elise stopped near the remains of an old highway, her posture tense. "There," she said, pointing. Asher followed her gaze. In the distance, past the skeletal remains of buildings, past the wasteland beyond, stood something unnatural. A wall. It was massive, stretching across the horizon. Not old and crumbling, like the ruins around them. But new. Reinforced. Built to keep something in. "The gray zone," Elise murmured. Asher narrowed his eyes. "That's where the safe haven is?" Elise didn't answer right away. Then she said, "That's where the signal came from." Asher clenched his jaw. The transmission. The last hope of a safe haven. It had come from inside that thing. A massive wall. A sealed-off zone. A place that no one came back from. Asher sighed. "Of course it did." Elise shot him a look. "We don't have another option." Asher exhaled through his nose. The phantoms were behind them. That thing was out there. And whatever was waiting for them in the gray zone was still unknown. But he had come too far to turn back now. "Then let's move," Asher said. They started toward the wall. And the wasteland swallowed them whole. The wall loomed over them like a silent sentinel, stretching across the ruined landscape as far as Asher could see. It was different from the rest of the wasteland, not rusted, not crumbling, but solid. New. Elise crouched behind an abandoned car, scanning the perimeter. "We have to find a way in." Asher wiped sweat from his brow. "And hope we're not walking into a death trap." Elise smirked. "Everything out here is a death trap." She wasn't wrong. The closer they got, the clearer it became, this wasn't just a wall. It was a prison. Massive floodlights lined the top, their glow flickering against the morning mist. Barbed wire curled along the edges. And at the center of it all, a gate, reinforced with layers of metal plating. A sign, faded and barely legible, was bolted to the structure. "Quarantine zone. No entry." Asher frowned. "Doesn't exactly scream safe haven." Elise didn't respond. She was focused on the structure itself, on something just beyond the gate. A figure. It moved in the shadows behind the metal, too fast to be a mindless husk. Elise's grip tightened on her pistol. "There's someone in there." Asher felt a flicker of something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. Then the gate moved. Metal groaned as gears churned, grinding against rust. The doors didn't fully open, just a small gap, barely wide enough for a person to slip through. Elise exchanged a wary glance with Asher. "Someone's inviting us in." Asher wasn't sure if that was a good thing. "Trap?" he asked. "Probably." They didn't have a choice. Asher took the lead, moving toward the gate with slow, cautious steps. Elise followed, her pistol raised. They stepped inside. And the world changed. The air was different on the other side of the wall. Stale. Heavy. The city behind them was dead, but this place was something else. Something worse. Asher's gut twisted. The buildings inside the quarantine zone weren't just abandoned, they were pristine. Not destroyed, not looted. As if time itself had stopped. It wasn't natural. Elise whispered, "This isn't right." Then, the gate behind them slammed shut. Boom. They spun around. The opening they had entered through was gone. The metal doors sealed shut, locking them inside. "Son of a," Asher's curse was cut short by a voice. "Turn around." The voice was calm. Cold. Asher turned. A man stood in the street ahead of them, partially obscured by the mist. He was dressed in black tactical gear, clean, well-maintained. Not a scavenger. Not a phantom. His rifle was slung across his back. He wasn't aiming at them. Not yet. You heard the transmission, the man said. That's why you came. Elise stepped forward. Who are you? The man didn't answer. He simply gestured. Follow me. Asher wasn't in the habit of trusting strangers. But right now, they had no other options. They followed. The streets were eerily silent as they walked. No bodies. No signs of struggle. It was as if the world inside the wall had been wiped clean. Then Asher saw it. A symbol, painted onto the walls of every building. A black circle with 3 slashes through it. Asher's stomach turned. I know that mark. Elise stiffened. So do I. The phantoms. She turned to their guide, her voice sharp. Who are you people? The man didn't stop walking. We are what's left. They reached a massive bunker entrance, built into the foundation of an old hospital. The metal doors groaned as they opened. Inside, rows of lights flickered to life, illuminating something Asher wasn't ready to see. Cages. Hundreds of them. Each one filled with people. They weren't prisoners. They weren't test subjects. They were alive. More alive than anyone Asher had seen in years. Clean. Federal. Some of them even smiled. Elisa's grip on her gun tightened. What the hell is this? The man turned to face them. For the first time, his expression shifted. This, he said, is the last safe haven. Asher didn't believe him for a second. Neither did Elise. The air was too clean. The people were too calm. Then Asher saw something that made his blood run cold. A woman, walking past one of the cages. Her skin was pale. Her movements too perfect. And her eyes glowed. The same eerie light as the thing that had hunted them in the city. Not a mindless husk. Not a phantom soldier. Something new. Elisa's breath hitched. Oh, God. Asher's gut twisted. This wasn't a safe haven. This was something worse. And now, they were trapped inside. Asher's muscles tensed. He wasn't sure what was worse, the eerie calm of the people inside the bunker or the fact that some of them weren't people at all. The woman with the glowing eyes didn't seem to notice them. She walked past the cages, her movements unnaturally smooth, like a machine wearing human skin. Elise took a half-step back, her fingers twitching toward her gun. The man who had led them inside, their guide, turned to face them. You don't need your weapons here. Asher's grip on his rifle tightened. Forgive me if I don't take your word for it. The man studied them, then exhaled as if dealing with frightened children. You're safe. Bullshit, Elise muttered. The man ignored her. I know you've seen what's out there. The dead are evolving. The phantoms are turning them into weapons. And if humanity is going to survive, we need to evolve too. Asher glanced at the cages. By locking people up? The man smiled, a calm, practiced smile. They're here willingly, he said. They're the future. Elisa's jaw clenched. Then why do their eyes glow? The man's smile didn't fade. He gestured toward the woman who had just passed them. This is Anna. Anna turned at the sound of her name. Her gaze met Asher's. Her eyes, pale, glowing, not human. But her voice was soft. Kind. Welcome, she said. You must be tired. Asher felt a chill crawl down his spine. She wasn't threatening them. There was no malice in her tone. And somehow, that made it worse. The man led them deeper into the bunker. It wasn't like the other settlements Asher had seen. It wasn't filthy or overcrowded. It wasn't filled with the stench of death and desperation. It was clean. Organized. Too perfect. People moved through the halls with purpose. No one was hungry. No one was sick. It should have been a miracle. Instead, it felt like a trap. Elise leaned in close. "We need to get out of here." Asher nodded. But before he could respond, the man stopped in front of a set of reinforced doors. "This is where it begins," he said, pressing a hand to a scanner. The doors slid open with a hiss. Beyond them was a lab. The air smelled like antiseptic. The walls were lined with computers, medical equipment, and containment pods filled with something Asher didn't want to look at. Some were empty. Others weren't. Inside one of the pods, a man lay strapped to a table. Wires and tubes ran into his body. His chest rose and fell steadily, unnaturally steady. His eyes were open. Glowing. Asher swallowed hard. "What the hell is this place?" The man turned to them, his expression calm. "This is where we perfect humanity." Elise stiffened. "Perfect?" The man nodded. "We have discovered a way to integrate the virus, to control it. To make us stronger. Faster. To resist the decay that has taken the rest of the world." Asher's stomach twisted. "You're turning people into them." The man shook his head. "No. We're making something better." Elise took a step back. "This is why you sent the transmission. You weren't offering a safe haven. You were looking for test subjects." The man didn't deny it. Instead, he turned to Asher. "Think about what we're offering you. No hunger. No fear. No sickness. We have survived where the rest of the world has fallen." He gestured toward the pod. "This man volunteered," he continued. "Like all the others." Asher clenched his jaw. "And the ones who didn't?" The man's smile faltered. "Just for a second. There will always be resistance to change," he admitted. "But we are ensuring the survival of the species." Elise scoffed. "At what cost?" The man didn't answer. Anna, the woman with the glowing eyes, stepped forward. "You're afraid," she said softly. "I understand." She took another step toward Asher. "We were afraid too," she whispered. "Until we saw the truth." Elise raised her gun. "Don't come any closer." Anna stopped. Not because she was afraid, but because she had chosen to. Her expression was almost sad. "You still think you have a choice," she murmured. Asher's heart pounded. They needed to leave. Now. Elise was already backing toward the door. Asher moved with her, keeping his rifle raised. The man sighed. "You can leave if you want." That caught them both off guard. He gestured toward the far end of the lab, toward a second door. "If you truly believe there is a better way, then go. Walk back into the wasteland. See how long you survive." Asher exchanged a look with Elise. It was too easy. Too simple. Elise whispered, "It's a trap." Asher already knew that. The man gestured again. "Or, you can stay. You can become something more." Asher's finger hovered over the trigger. He had seen enough. He turned toward the exit. Elise followed. Anna spoke one last time. "You'll be back," she whispered. And somehow, Asher believed her. Asher and Elise moved quickly, each step measured, careful. The so-called perfect survivors didn't try to stop them. They just watched. Anna stood still, her glowing eyes locked onto Asher's like she could already see how this would end. Asher hated that part of him agreed with her. The exit was right there, the second door leading out of the bunker's lab. It was too easy. Elise reached for the door panel. Hesitated. Then, she looked over her shoulder. "This is a mistake," she whispered. "We should burn this place to the ground." The man in black, the one who had led them here, sighed. "That would be unfortunate." Elise clenched her jaw. Asher didn't disagree, but they weren't armed for a war. Not yet. Later, he muttered. They pushed through the door. The moment they stepped into the hallway, alarms screamed. Red warning lights flashed, casting long shadows across the walls. A voice, calm and robotic, echoed through the speakers. "Unauthorized exit detected. Security lockdown in progress." Asher cursed. Elise spun. "You said we could leave," she shouted back at the man. The man stood just beyond the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You can," he said simply. "If you make it." Then the doors slammed shut. Asher didn't wait. He grabbed Elisa's arm and ran. The halls twisted like a maze, sterile and wrong. Unlike the wasteland outside, everything here was intact, unbroken. And that terrified Asher more than the ruins. He rounded a corner, his boots pounding against polished tile. Elise kept pace, pistol drawn. "We need to find another exit," she said. "No shit." Then Asher heard something behind them. A soft clicking sound. Barely a whisper. Footsteps, but not human ones. Elise heard it too. She grabbed his sleeve and yanked him into a side corridor. They ducked behind a storage unit, weapons raised. The sound grew closer. Then Asher saw it. A figure moved down the hallway, slow and deliberate. It wasn't Anna. It wasn't one of the others. It was worse. A phantom soldier. But not like the ones Asher had fought before. This one was changed. Its armor was reinforced, its movements eerily smooth. And when it turned its head slightly, Asher saw the glow beneath its helmet. Glowing eyes. It wasn't just infected. It was controlled. Elisa's breath hitched. They're putting the virus into their own people. Asher swallowed hard. Or what's left of them. The soldier turned its head slightly, like it was listening. Then it moved, fast. It shot toward their hiding spot in a blur of motion. Asher fired first. The bullet struck center mass, but the soldier barely flinched. Elisa's shot hit the head. That made it stumble. But it didn't go down. The thing turned toward them, grinning. Asher's blood ran cold. It felt the pain. And it enjoyed it. "Run!" Elise shouted. They sprinted down the hall, ducking through an open doorway just as the thing lunged. Asher slammed the door shut. The lock held, but only barely. A second later, a heavy fist slammed against the metal. Elise backed away. "We need to get out of here. Now." Asher turned, scanning the room. It looked like a control center, filled with old monitors and blinking consoles. Then he saw it. A map on one of the screens. A layout of the entire bunker. And a maintenance tunnel leading outside. "There." Asher pointed. "That's our way out." Elise nodded. "Then let's move." The door groaned as the thing pounded against it again. They didn't wait to see if it would break through. They ran. The maintenance tunnel was dark. Rusted pipes lined the walls, and the air smelled of mold and decay. Asher's flashlight cut through the gloom. Almost there. Elise exhaled. "If this leads into a dead end, I'm going back and killing everyone." Asher almost laughed. Almost. Then, the lights flickered. A voice echoed through the tunnel. Soft. Too soft. "You're making a mistake." Asher turned sharply, heart hammering. Anna's voice. But she wasn't there. It was coming from the speakers embedded in the walls. Elise clenched her jaw. "Shut up." Anna continued, unfazed. "You still don't understand, do you? The wasteland is dying. Humanity is dying. But here, we have survived. We have become something more." Asher kept moving. "Not interested." Anna sighed. "You will be." Then the tunnel shook. Metal groaned. A deep, inhuman growl rumbled from ahead. Elise skidded to a halt. "Tell me that's not what I think it is." Asher flicked his flashlight forward. His stomach dropped. A gate blocked their path. And on the other side of it, something huge shifted in the darkness. The tunnel trembled as it moved. A deep, unnatural clicking sound filled the air. Then, slowly, the creature stepped into the light. And Asher's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't a phantom soldier. It wasn't one of Anna's perfected people. It was something worse. Something ancient. Something the phantoms had been keeping locked away. And now, it was waking up. The thing beyond the gate stirred. It was massive, easily 9 feet tall, its hunched form barely fitting inside the maintenance tunnel. Thick, sinewy muscles twisted beneath pale, leathery skin. But the worst part? It had no eyes. Only a sunken, wrinkled mass where a face should be. It sniffed the air, a wet, guttural sound that made Asher's skin crawl. Then, it moved. The creature lunged, slamming against the rusted gate with a force that sent a metallic screech through the tunnel. Asher and Elise stumbled back. "What the hell is that?" Elise shouted. Asher didn't answer. His mind was already racing. The phantoms had been hiding this thing. Keeping it contained. Why? The creature growled, a sound so low Asher felt it in his bones. Then, the speakers crackled. Anna's voice filled the tunnel. "I warned you." Elise gritted her teeth. "Turn it off, Anna." But Anna ignored her. "That creature was here long before the virus. Before us. We didn't create it. We only kept it asleep." The gate groaned, bending inward. Anna continued, her voice maddeningly calm. "You should have stayed." Asher's heart pounded. They had seconds, maybe less. His eyes darted around the tunnel. There, a service ladder. Elise. Up. They sprinted toward it just as the gate gave way. Metal shrieked. Then the creature charged. Asher shoved Elise up the ladder first. The moment her boots left the ground, he followed, just as something slammed into the space where they had stood. The tunnel shook. Asher climbed faster. Below, the creature roared. It jumped. For a terrifying moment, Asher thought it would reach them. Its clawed fingers scraped the ladder, missing Elise's boot by inches. Then, it fell. The thing hit the ground hard, sending cracked spiderwebbing across the floor. But it wasn't dead. It was angry. And it was coming back. Elise reached the top and kicked open the maintenance hatch. Sunlight flooded the shaft. They were outside. Asher pulled himself through. They were standing on the bunker's rooftop, a stretch of reinforced concrete overlooking the wasteland. And for the first time in hours, Asher took a breath of open air. Elise stumbled forward, panting. "Tell me we have a plan." Asher looked around. No phantoms. No soldiers. Just them, the wasteland, and the hatch behind them. Which was starting to rattle. Asher cursed. They couldn't fight that thing. They needed to leave. Then, his eyes locked onto something in the distance. The fuel depot. A massive metal structure built to power the bunker's operations. Rows of fuel tanks lined the side, and judging by the warning signs, they were still full. Elise followed his gaze. No way. It's our best shot. She groaned. That's what I was afraid of. The hatch behind them burst open. The creature pulled itself through, its massive hands gripping the concrete ledge. Asher fired. Elise fired. Bullets tore into its flesh, but it barely flinched. Then it charged. They ran. The fuel depot wasn't far, but the creature was faster. It moved like a nightmare, its body low to the ground, running on all fours, muscles coiled like steel. Asher and Elise barely made it inside before it slammed into the doors, warping the metal inward. They didn't stop. Asher's eyes locked onto the fuel tanks. The pipes running through the ceiling. Elise grabbed his sleeve. Tell me you know what you're doing. I have a guess. She groaned. Fantastic. The creature ripped the doors apart. It stepped inside, sniffing the air. It knew. Elise fired. Not at the creature, at the fuel lines. Bullets pierced metal. Gas hissed into the air. Asher pulled out a flare. The creature snarled and lunged. Asher lit the flare. Then, he threw it. Boom. The world turned to fire. The explosion tore through the depot, shattering tanks, sending a wave of heat through the wasteland. Asher and Elise hit the ground hard, rolling as debris rained down around them. The bunker behind them groaned. Metal twisted, collapsing inward. The creature? It was gone. Buried beneath the wreckage. Silence followed. Just the wind. The distant cries of the wasteland. Elise groaned, pushing herself up. Asher exhaled. We're alive. Elise coughed. For now. They turned to look at what was left of the bunker. Nothing but fire and ruin. The phantoms, perfect survivors, had no safe haven anymore. Anna's voice would never haunt them again. Asher let out a slow breath. Let's get moving. Elise nodded. Where? Asher stared at the burning wreckage. Then, he turned to the endless wasteland beyond. The world was still broken. Still dying. But maybe, just maybe, they weren't. For now, that was enough. They started walking. And they didn't look back. The end.